Hello, Miss. My name is Nari Joana Osorio Villatoro. I'm going to explain about the sound of consonant sound. The first letter is J. The sound of J is ja. One example is cham or H. The characters palatals, glide, voice. Letter M. The sound is mm. One example is miss. Characteristic bilabial nasal voiced. And the sound is n. One example is need. Characteristic alveolar nasal voice. The sound is a. One example is long and thin. Characteristic bilabial liquid and voice. The sound is sh. One example is education and shop. Characteristic alveolar, fricative, and voiceless. The sound is cha. Example, judge and knowledge. Characteristic alveolar, fricative, and voiced. The sound is G. G. One example is conclusion and characteristic alveolar, fricative, and voiced. The sound is T. T. Example, shop, watch, and nature. Characteristic alveolar, fricative, and voiceless. So the sound is sh, sh. One example is tree and think. Characteristic dental, fricative, and voiceless. The sound is brr, brr. Example, three, there, and so. Characteristic dentals, fricative, and voiced. The sound is sh, sh. One example is sit and characteristic alveolar, fricative, and voiceless. The sound is ha. One example is how. Characteristic glotals, fricative, and voiceless. The sound is b. Example, sieve and view. Characteristic labiodentals, fricative, and voiced. Letter F. The sound is f. One example is feet. Characteristic labiodental, fricative, and voiced. The sound is g. G. One example is get. Characteristic bilar, stop, and voiced. The sound is ko. Ko. Characteristic bilar, stop, and voiceless. The sound is da. One example is dog. Characteristic alveolar, stop, and voiced. The sound is ta. One example is time. Characteristic alveolar, stop, and voiceless. Letter B. The sound is bo. Bo. One example is bag. Characteristic bilabial, stop, and voice. The sound is th, th, th. Uh, One example is ethy and characteristic alveolar, fricative, and voice. Letter L. The sound is la. One example is fill, characteristic alveolars, liquid, and voice. Letter W. The sound is gua. Gua. One example is guan and guai. Characteristic bilabial, glide, and voiced. The sound is er. Er. One example is right and characteristic palatal, liquid, and voiced. Letter P. The sound is P. Example pot. Characteristic bilabial, voiceless, and stop. Thank you.